Welcome to the Fixing Incentives podcast, where we talk about the incentives that drive success. Now, let's get started with the show.
David Melamed here. I'm the host of Fixing Incentives podcast, where I talk with top business leaders about their journey and the behavior that powered their growth. I have Dr. Jeremy Weiss here of Rise 25, who has done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and we have flipped the script and he'll be interviewing me.
David, I'm excited. And why? Because I told you not to tell me the story before because I could hear for the first time about how losing $15,000 on a campaign led to $1 million outcome, and why you went against what everyone was telling you and still proceeded forward, and your thought process on why you did that. Before we get to that, this episode is brought to you by Tenfold Traffic. And I know for you, David, you're only working on projects and taking things on that are a performance-based relationship. And this is actually a great example. This is a great example. And I said right before we get started, I said, so wait, you are basically at huge risk here. And you're like, yes. What that means is performance-based relationship is all marketing goes through you on your dime, and you negotiate a revenue share. Because ultimately, if you make a lot of money for someone, you want to be able to share in that and not make maybe just a small monthly fee for running their ads. So, if they're making a lot of money, you want to be able to share in some of it, and participate in the full value. So I know for you, if there's a company out there like, this sounds great, I can hire David. He's going to put all his money at risk and I have no risk. Well, it does. But the catch is, I know you're only looking for one or two companies per year to pour that you believe in what their company does and their offers, and to pour your heart and soul into partnering with that company. So if you hear that and you are an ideal partner, basically you have to have a converting funnel. You could handle scale and let David work his magic. And you also know your lifetime value of a client. You can go to davidmelamed.com or email him at david@tenfoldtraffic.com. So David, let's get into it. Before we get into how losing $15,000 in a campaign led to $1 million outcome, I want you to lay the foundation of the relationship first. What did you go into? What was the arrangement, I guess?
So the arrangement was I would lay out the money for the advertising and run the campaigns, and they would we would share in the revenue generated from it, and they gave me a guarantee that I wouldn't lose the actual ad spend as long as they didn't lose money either. So as long as the revenue was enough to cover the ad spend, they would reimburse the ad spend at least, and then we'd be sharing in the profits.
Yeah.
So that was the relationship, at least when we got started. And they started with a $15,000 test budget guarantee. So they were only willing to guarantee up to $15,000.
Yeah. I mean, with that, they can guarantee that, but you're still at a break-even point. Like, you haven't made any money. Even if, okay, this campaign made $15,000, you've already spent $15,000 on the ad budgets. You're just at $0 for your time and energy.
Yeah. And a lot of these campaigns are also front loaded. So I would really be under the gun if it failed.
Yeah. And it's a lot of time to get it up and running. But I mean, I guess you have to just choose your projects and companies wisely, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And this was a case though, where it was I had to act quickly. So I didn't have the time to set up the right processes and tracking and foundation. I knew things were going to be a little sloppy going in.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're at risk for your time. You're at risk for your money at this point. So they have zero risk, really, because if it doesn't work, they're like, cool, David just spent all this time and money and we can walk away. So talk about the first phase, I guess, where I guess you lost the money, essentially.
So I should give a caveat, which is the way I think about marketing, especially when you're getting campaigns off the ground, is your initial job is not to be profitable. Your initial job is to prove or disprove your hypotheses as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So At this point in time, I didn't know how well the landing page will convert. These were for, SBA-backed business loans. I didn't know what percentage of the actual leads that we generated would, get approved by underwriting and get submitted to the SBA. I didn't know how many the SBA would actually approve. I didn't know how many would get funded, and then how many, I would ultimately get paid for. And so starting to answer those questions of, if I bring qualified, relevant traffic to the site, what percentage of people that come to the site are going to actually, fill out the form or start the application, and kind of tracking that entire flow until the point of the ads been actually bringing back revenue. So, while the first thing we're looking for is the website even capable of converting, right? Because the moment I spend even a few $100s, if I don't see a lead coming through, or at least some early indicators that it's going to work. In this case, I actually had the opposite situation. There was a landing page that was really just an email opt-in form, and then a second page to the form, which was the actual business loan application, which was actually on a third-party website. And
you do that so you can at least capture their information in case you want to email them or basically remarket to them before they have to fill out this long, cumbersome form that they may bounce from.
Correct. And also it gives us another layer of tracking to reconcile, because like sometimes things could break on a redirect or things like that. But now we have an email address captured, so we could say this lead came from this source. And what was happening was it was actually converting really well on that first page.
So what was the first page? What was included? What did they have to fill out? First name, last name, email?
Not even that, just an email address.
Just email. Okay.
Just email. And so, there is a lesson there, which is sometimes, when you ask for too little information, you don't do a good enough job qualifying the visitors, and you get a bunch of junk and maybe even bots here and there and things like that. But I had this $15,000 budget, and I was going to test multiple channels. So I was going to test Google, Microsoft ads. I was going to maybe do some Facebook ads. I was going to try a TikTok campaign, because TikTok had a big promotion going on where you got free ad spend.
Like if 15-year-olds need an SBA loan? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, surprisingly, TikTok reaches pretty much everybody in the country nowadays.
Okay.
Or world even. But it's also, one thing with advertising is, as other people get smarter to what works and what doesn't work, it gets more competitive and more expensive. So newer channels are usually going to be more cheaper for customer acquisition. And then I was going to run some native ads on Rev Content and Taboola and Outbrain and a few other, and Quora and a few other channels. Now, obviously, every channel takes its own expertise, and I don't have that deep expertise in every one of these channels. But my goal at this stage was really just to kind of taste the traffic, get a feeling for what can and can't work, etc. What was interesting is that my Google and Microsoft ads were converting really, really well on that first page, where everybody thought this was going to work really well. But then they were when the tracking for the actual loan applications from the bank basically was like none of them were turning into applications. It didn't make any sense.
So basically, they'd fill out the email. There was a high conversion on that. They get to the next page where they have to fill out the registration. And that's where the drop off was? Well, or was it after they fill out the registration, being whatever the next step is, approved by whatever source?
So I don't have a great answer to that question, because I never had access to those systems.
Got it.
I had access to the first page system. So when those emails came through, I saw them. But everything else, I was relying on other people telling me, this is what happened to the leads. And
you have to have a lot of trust with these companies to work with them, because, I mean, I'm not saying someone's going to make something up, but they can be like, nope, none of those happened,
Yeah, it's interesting because you need more than just trust in the people. You need trust in the technology too. I actually think what happened here is they were using a plugin that grabbed tracking parameters, and it used some sort of cookie system. And I didn't know this till later, but there were several hundred emails sent out to people that were in the database of this company prior to what I did. And anybody that would have clicked on those emails and came to the website would have been cookied to a different source. And by the time it reached the application, for all I know, my things could have turned to applications and it wouldn't have been attributed to me. Now, I had no way of knowing what was going on, what wasn't. All I knew is that, by the time we were about $15,000 of spending, I was convinced things were working well. And these partners said, shut everything down. We're not guaranteeing another penny. This is just a complete failure. Maybe they saw like a couple $100 worth of revenue that they could attribute to that first $15,000 of spend. And there's a few things that I kind of discovered along the way.
So you're seeing tons of emails going through, converting. You see that. And they're seeing from their end, okay, these people, whoever these emails are not converting into more than that. So they're telling you to shut it down.
Yeah.
And so where does the conversation go from there?
It gets heated. And I basically eventually say, I'm trusting my instincts and continuing to spend. And I don't need your guarantee.
Yeah. So you leave the safety net of, okay, we'll give you 15,000 to test. And now you're like, well, you're seeing one thing, they're seeing another. And that kind of goes back into the tracking. Is that why you think they're saying, okay, I think we need to shut this thing down?
So, there was a couple things I didn't realize at the time, but I understand now. So there's a sales cycle with any sort of lead generation. And let's just assume for a second someone searches on Google today and clicks on an ad, and maybe they work on that application and complete it today even. But there's probably some people that clicked on an ad today and then fill out an application in a week from now. And so there's also that lag. And then some of the applications were going through automated underwriting and submitted directly to the SBA. Others had to go through manual underwriting, which could take 3 days or 7 days. So at this stage, there wasn't enough time to know that anything was going to turn into revenue. But it didn't look like things were even getting to the stage of potentially becoming revenue. At least not at the scale that made sense to them, but it didn't add up to me. And so I personally was convinced that this was a tracking and attribution problem. And if I had the opportunity to audit the systems. So I'll just give you a very simple example. They're giving us an email address and then ending up on another page. And that page asks them for an email address again. If one of those two email addresses was a typo, they typed in for Gmail, GMIAL, in one of them. And we're just matching things with email addresses without going through like a ETL or data normalization process first, where we clean it up and reconcile it, or even, a data append process where we can take an email address and find 5 other email addresses associated with that person or company and match it. Without that process, which is a very tedious process. So I felt like there's a very decent chance that if this is a tracking problem, we could resolve it with a manual audit at some point. But without that tracking, it didn't make sense to me that they were converting on the first page at the rate that they were converting, and then just like nothing happening with anybody. It didn't add up to me based on the type of search it was, the type of behavior, et cetera. But there's another piece to this that comes from my experience in my career, which is very, very telling and interesting about search, which is my very first successes online were in car donations and in cash for cars. in the cash for car industry, we had pages converting at like 40% of visitors into leads. And that's not just an email address, that's a phone number, or that's actually calling up. Because at the end of the day, someone who goes to Google and types in, sell my junk car
or something.
Well, junk car specifically, because they think it's garbage. And to call up a company and find out how much will you give me for my car, it's really a very soft sell. Like, you're giving them free money, essentially. Well, who's not going to pick up the phone and make that phone call? So I learned very early on that search engines specifically were very, very good for converting those very easy conversion event type things, like giving away free money. A couple of years later, I had a very big success with a home care company in something called CDPAP, Consumer Directed Personal Care, which essentially it's a Medicaid waiver program where family members could get paid to care for their loved ones. So it's the exact same scenario again. Someone's going to Google and searching for get paid to care for loved ones. Again, free money. They're looking to get paid for something that they're probably doing anyways. And that converted really well. And, we probably spent over $1 million on those campaigns at one point. And so at this point, I've already had 2 experiences with search engines working really, really well, generating leads for giving free money. And this was, an SBA-backed loan that was forgivable. I myself went to Google to search it and converted myself from my own behavior. I just instinctively knew that this is how people were going to apply to multiple banks. They were going to apply a bunch of different ways, but they were going to go to search engines and they were going to apply. And the first page conversion validated that for me. And so I had no doubt in my mind that these were the right people. So we're bringing the right people at the right time when they're interested. So where's something broken here? And so my instinct said it was tracking. But the piece that I didn't understand at this time that this company I worked with understood is that we didn't even have enough time to know what the SBA was going to approve or not. We didn't realize at this point that the first, that thousands of applications were going to get gummed up within the SBA's pipes because of new anti-fraud measures they put in place. And because there was technology involved, every time a small thing was changed in an application by the SBA, it broke a whole bunch of things and people had to scramble to fix it. So I was assuming that just because I found the right people and got the leads, that would be enough for it to turn into revenue. And the company had the opposite assumption. They were like, we don't know if anything's going to convert. This looks like a complete mess. And even if we bring in all the right people, maybe nothing's going to get funded at the end of the day. And so they had a very conservative perspective, and I had a very liberal perspective about what was working and what wasn't. And, it was who was right and who was wrong. I think we were both wrong, to be honest, at that stage. But one of the things that drove me, and this is something that I think about constantly, and I think it's often misunderstood. The person who's searching on Google today is a different person than the person searching tomorrow. So let's say what this company would have been fine with is after 10,000 instead of the full 15,000 saying, let's wait a month. Let's wait 3 weeks. Let's give time to see what happens with the SBA. And then we could spend money when it works. What was going through my head is every competitor is probably going to say the same thing. We don't know it's going to work. We don't know what's going to get funded. Let's slow down. Let's not spend money. But search engines are an auction. And nowadays, where people often use like conversion bidding, where they tell Google spend X amount per lead and let Google go crazy with it, they could be spending a fortune on bids. My instincts told me that not only am I going to miss the person today that's searching if I wait till tomorrow, but I'm going to be able to reach the person today for a fraction of the cost of reaching the person tomorrow. So I'm going to keep on spending to get these cheaper leads, and I'm going to be happy with a certain amount of I wasn't confident that I wasn't going to lose the money, but I was confident that I was better served spending that money now than waiting till all the competition got smart about what's working and waited for the data to flow. And that's really where our disagreement was the prudent thing was to be conservative and to wait. But I felt like that was going to miss the boat. And sometimes you just have to take a risk and take a dive. And I had the benefit of two very large career successes in a very similar pattern. I'm very good at recognizing patterns. This pattern of going to search engines to get free money. I just knew it works. And I wasn't willing to accept that it wasn't working. What happened next, though, could have probably bankrupted me. So, 15K was all they risked, but I was probably another $30,000-$40,000 in, still without certainty.
So you're at a crossroads. You're at 15K. They're like, stop. You're like, no, all signals point to go. And so you go. So what happens next?
I continue spending money. Our relationship ends up very tenuous because the nature of the deal, they're not sure if they have to be guaranteeing above the 15,000 or not. It's not like it was solidified. I officially had a certain amount of leeway with the decisions. That's just what they were comfortable with. But they were getting very anxious about it and frustrated with me and upset. And I had to kind of reassure them that I'm the one taking the risk, not them here, but that I'm going to want to audit all their systems and all their data. And it was quite a roller coaster.
So you spend another, how much before you see any signs of life?
So this is where it gets a little interesting because we made a change, and that's when things suddenly work. Bear in mind, at the $15,000 point, I had data of how much it cost per click, what keywords people were searching for, what questions they were asking. I had a lot of information about where to point, what direction to go, etc. And one thing I noticed, which is something I see consistently across other industries, is a significant portion of the search volume was around various different banks and this program. So people weren't just searching generically. I mean, some people were searching generically for this business loan program.
Yeah.
Other people, so an example would be someone might search Google for business loans, and someone else might search for, Wells Fargo business loans.
Chase, you're
Exactly.
Chase checking like, oh, what does Chase have? And, let's see Chase in business loans.
Right. And then there was also a lot of companies that were running all sorts of promotions around these services. So people were getting emails and hearing from their friends about it. So the demand was growing, the search was growing, but there was different behavior in how people search. There were some people searching generically, other people searching about their types of businesses. So business loans for S corps, business loans for LLCs, business loans for nonprofits, business loans for trucking companies, for restaurants. So there was a lot of different ways people were searching, and they had different intents. And I started having this data probably before any competitors did because I was taking more risks. But I continued spending and continued hearing that it wasn't working. I saw the leads coming through, the email addresses, but eventually it just something was broken. I couldn't get access to the data. It's obviously we're dealing with banks, so they legally can't share their data. And so I wasn't even certain I was going to be able to audit systems if I wanted to. And I was probably about $60,000 in. And at this point, this is like money that I did not want to risk. And I thought for sure it was profitable and making money. I started having small indications of a few $1,000s of revenue, maybe 10% of the money returned. But most people would have pulled the plug at this stage. And I basically just went to the company and I said, I need a direct link to the bank. They were capturing email addresses on this landing page and then saying nothing was happening after that landing page. I basically said, I need to send people directly to that landing page, to the bank application page. I needed to remove that one step. And there was 3 reasons why I believe that was crucial. One, this bank was a big bank with brand recognition, and I saw people searching for banks. And the second reason is it's one extra step in the process that might actually be breaking people's, like, the congruency of the moment. Like they might be expecting
You won't have the
one
branding
thing.
of the bank on your page, and then it sends them to the bank, and they're like, "What is this? The same thing?"
Exactly. And then, so that worried me too. And all in all, I just they gave me a direct link.
Isn't
Was
that a
not
risk on your part though? Because they give you a direct link. Now you don't even have an email to prove that you got that.
So yes, it's a risk, but I at this point I was also able to add conversion tracking to the site, to the bank's website. So I was going to be able to track conversion events, and I tracked an entire funnel. So there's 5 stages in the application. I was able to track every stage. But more importantly, I was relying on direct tracking. I had to have that email address and that lead. But there were tons of people clicking on the website, not converting today, that were coming back tomorrow. And them coming back tomorrow could have been through a different link, a different way, and maybe I wasn't going to get any credit for it. What I basically got was a completely new instance of a link to the site, so not used by anybody else. So there was actually a Salesforce instance that was impossible to come from any source but what I was running, which essentially meant that if I sent somebody to the page and then a week later they came back to the page another way and filled out or completed the application, I still got credit for it. And
unless they cleared their cookies in their computer or something like that. Right?
No, but that's the thing. As long as they ended up on this URL, there was no one else that was using it anywhere. It was only for me.
Got it.
Their browser would have recognized that URL probably. I wasn't relying on anything except for what actually made it, and literally overnight it 10x. And I started seeing millions of dollars of loan applications coming in every single day on the same exact campaigns, same keywords, same strategies, just overnight, 10x. But I was in a huge hole, right? I'm 60,000 in a hole at this stage. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to audit those systems. And so I have to start scaling my spend to dig myself out of that hole. And bit by bit, maybe 2-3 weeks later, I was at the point where, it was doing about $20,000 a day in profits. And I even had a couple of days that broke $100,000 in profit. And it's just like, I was able to optimize at this point. I was able to use automated bidding. I had a tremendous amount of data. But most importantly, I was now trafficking a page branded by the bank that everybody recognized, right? The person that goes to Google and searches for Chase Bank business loans, that sees an ad for Chase Bank and lands on Chase Bank website, that person's converting. And the person searching just for business loans that sees Chase Bank is converting too. Much quicker on Chase Bank than on, Bob's Barbecue and Bank Outlet. So that brand ability and that ability to not rely just on the last click for the conversion was the difference between profitability and not. I don't think the extra step was the problem as much as the incongruency in the branding.
Yeah. And by the way, we're using Chase as an example. That is not the bank necessarily here. So,
although if you work for Chase and you do want a performance partner to run your marketing, feel free to reach out.
There you go. At what point did the partners you're working with turn around and realize, because you can't keep, even if the money's coming in to that other company, you're still spending the money on the campaign. So at some point you need some kind of backing here? At what point do they say, okay, David, yes, we're giving you our blessing, keep going?
Immediately from when they
Immediately.
saw the results. There was no bad faith happening here at any point of time. Everybody was on the same page. It was just a matter of risk versus understanding the risk and the earlier risks that were taken. Maybe the things I ran the first month were actually never worked. And maybe those people never filled in applications, and auditing the systems would show I wasted all that money. But had I given up earlier and not kept on trying things and saying, okay, I see the search behavior, how do I create a better matched experience for the user? If I didn't push for that, I would have never found the profitability. I would have just given up way too quickly. And it wouldn't have been, a massive 7-figure payday.
So, David, first of all, one last question. I want you just to talk about some of the overarching big lessons from this, but I want to point people towards davidmelamed.com. That is David, Melamed.com. And then they could email you if you have questions at david@tenfoldtraffic.com. So as a recap, what were some of the big overarching lessons?
The number one lesson is there's lots of moving parts in marketing. And just because something doesn't work doesn't mean you should pull the plug on it. It means that you should deconstruct it and put it back together. Maybe there's just a piece in the puzzle that plugging that changes something from losing money to making money, and making money at scale. I mean, we're talking about at one point in time, we were bringing in over 1,000 applications a day. Like finding an offer that can convert to the tune of 1,000 conversions a day is like, those are the gold mines. Those are the holy grails that you're chasing. So it has to have the potential. Don't be dumb and don't waste money stupidly, but also recognize that the tracking and the data is not the territory. It's just a map. And the person searching today is it's a different person searching tomorrow. So you waiting 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks for more information to come in to know what's going to work. But your competitors are also waiting for that same information. You're giving up a competitive edge that you're missing out on, which maybe it's worthwhile to do that. Maybe it's not, but you have to evaluate it in that context. And also don't just assume, you really have to think about it from the user perspective. At the end of the day, the person searching for that business loan, whatever is going to make them convert the best is what was important. And also constantly learn and listen. Like I took risks that I would not have taken had I had all the information, but I didn't have all the information, and it worked out. And it could have gone the other way. So it could have been, God, luck, whatever you want, karma. Maybe I'm a good person. I don't know, but it definitely. Definitely take in other perspectives, constantly learn, and always put the user first and think about their experience ultimately, because that's what actually reflects reality the most.
I said it was the last question. Actually, I have a second. That was my second last question. My last question actually is, were there any surprises of traffic sources? Because you said in the very beginning, you were testing a bunch of traffic sources. Were there any surprises there?
Yeah. Microsoft ads ended up actually being the most profitable channel by far. It outperformed Google. It had a ton of volume. And a lot of people, especially in the US, underestimate, Microsoft ads, which formerly called Bing ads. They don't realize that the search bar in every Windows device is built in to Cortana, which searches Microsoft. The Microsoft powers other search engines and other sites that you might come across. And the Microsoft Edge browser is in a bunch of places.
I am shocked at that.
It's something like 25-30% of US market share, and it's a higher income demographic. What people don't know about Microsoft that's really interesting is because Microsoft owns LinkedIn targeting data is built into Microsoft Search. So you could actually say, let's say you want to target restaurant owners who also are looking for business loans on search engines, you can actually target that using the LinkedIn data in your Microsoft Ads account. So it has additional capabilities that Google doesn't have. It's also less competitive. The competitors didn't get there as quickly. And there's one other thing that is super useful, and this is my secret weapon. This is actually the real secret to the success I had with these campaigns. I'm not going to reveal everything, but Google hides about 30% of the searches you show up for in your reporting. So you don't even know what someone searched that you showed up for. Microsoft not only reports on everything that you get clicks on, they report on everything that gets searched that your ad showed up for. So clickless impressions. So when Google would show me 3,000 search terms, Microsoft was showing me 25,000. And mining that uncovered all sorts of keyword opportunities and search behavior that I would never imagine. And what I actually discovered is that there's full URLs for like bank applications that people were copying and pasting into the search engines. And when you do that in Chrome, it opens the URL. When you do that on Microsoft, it opens a search. And so I was actually able to target people actually trying to access like an application for these loans at other banks with linked to our application. I would have never discovered that without that data.
David, first want to thank you. Everyone, thanks for having me. Go to davidmelamed.com, email him, david@tenfoldtraffic.com. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dr. Jeremy Weiss. This is awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Fixing Incentives podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.